think I need to like start playing some pump up music at the beginning of this meeting because I just have like black screens and me waiting.
You won't be alone, Katie.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Although I gotta do my hair apparently. Oh wait, it's Friday and I'm just like, but I am glad I was muted because I just sneezed up but that's just how I sneeze. That's just I don't have COVID.
I feel like it's dangerous to sneeze out in public now because it could completely be allergies, but I feel like people are gonna like attack me with like spray bottles of disinfectant or something.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, we have about half of you, and I expected about 11 of you. So I'm missing still some key components, but we will go ahead and get started and catch people up as they join. So as you might have seen, I promised I would stop sending out multiple emails and then sent out multiple emails anyway in the same day. But I sent out both a summary sheet of the mural board. So essentially that was all of your sticky notes in Word format. And then I also sent out kind of key themes that you all kind of presented in that, broken down into a 1 to 26 step that I'm hoping that we can kind of start to consolidate, potentially pull key things that you all want to work on over the next year. I will transparently say I don't think we're going to get to all 26 over the next year, but we can certainly try and start to prioritize from top to bottom as to what is important to you all. And then really start to say like what fits together, what is the board responsible for, and then what all do you want to kind of push down to either the committee or a certain subcommittee to work on, or potentially even a work group if you want to create a work group off of it. Hi, Eric. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I wanted to, we can kind of do it one of two ways. We can either start with the summary and walk through it if you all haven't had a chance to review that, or we can start with the key themes. Does anybody have a preference? Transparently, totally okay if you didn't even review this email prior to today.
I peeked at it and I thought it was a lot. So I actually don't know if I think if we should do it like key takeaways or go. Your call.
All right, seeing every other person muted, I would recommend starting with key themes, and then if we have questions about those, we can dive back into kind of the breakdown summary. So, based off of that, we will start with these key themes. And I will say that these key themes are really started from a top-down sticky note. So as we compare the two different documents, kind of start to bottom, not a list of 1 to 26 in level of priority. That's what I'm hoping you all can help decide today.
Katie, can you zoom in a little bit?
Yes, thank you. It's sitting right in front of me and I never think about that.
Maybe even one more. Mold.
All right, so first one, really just you kind of broadly stated you want to focus on policy decisions. So really picking, I would say, a series of policy decisions to focus on and how you want to move those forward. This was like both a combination of COC policies, but also a greater policy in general. So we'll put that out there. The second big theme, developing a monthly dashboard of work being done. There was multiple thoughts of this should only be COC funded agencies. This should include performance measures or should not. And should it include a broader than just COC funded agencies? So wanted to get some decision points and thoughts around that if we move forward with that. Sharing success stories, emerging practices, and progress towards goals. Is it helpful for me to walk through all of these? Yes, okay. Being the centralized clearinghouse of work in the community and how to elevate and enhance that work. So really understanding what all is happening and the COC board being the holder of that information. Creating a landscape map, allowing the board to be aware of all the activities and the information, both within the COC and outside the COC. So this is both 5 and 6. Ensuring coordination and overlap, avoiding overlap or conflicting priorities, and then also just creating a landscape map of all the groups meeting and what all these different groups are working on. So both within the COC, what is the work being done and are there overlaps, and with both inside and outside the continuum COC funded, what is happening. Also creating a process for how we're staying up to date on all this work. So we all know that there are 35,000 groups meeting on homelessness. And so how are we knowing everything that is going on in those groups? Identifying annual needs and gaps to determine priorities. So where, based off that landscape map and process, what are we missing and what needs to be happening so that we can start to say, these are the things we want to be funding, or starting to direct policy around that funding. Aligning priorities to each level of government in order to share needs. So what should be something we're asked, what is a state policy versus a county policy versus a local government policy? Creating a 2 to 3 pager that shares policies, actions, and best practices. Creating a community champions group, or just a communications work group. Better disperse current material to needed stakeholders. So some of this material is created and we already have it, and better getting it out either through the community champions group or a different group. Showcasing the work of the state low-income housing tax credit and housing trust fund to advocate for additional funding. Identify policy changes of the PHAs or LIHTC developers to match vouchers with units through coordinated entry. So potentially changing some of those policies within LIHTC and the Housing Trust Fund. Develop a process for recognizing accomplishments. You threw out mission moments, COC spotlights, recognizing individuals. There's a lot of ideas. Reporting on ongoing evaluation by MAG staff of COC funded agencies. This could include desk monitoring, on-site monitoring, evaluation of system performance measures, strengths and weaknesses of providers, site visits by board members, etc. Monitoring must include follow-up and technical assistance to providers. Revisiting uniform data elements on a regular basis and determine what policies should be included versus the role of the data subcommittee. Develop a list of data to be presented to the board on a regular basis, including expectations and communication of that data. So where are there trends, problem areas, what needs an explanation from the data subcommittee or for you all. Developing a process to drive continuous improvement of the coordinated entry system. Throughout, everything was aligning the work with the regional action plan. So I just put it on here once. Creating a communication pathway for those impacted by homelessness to the COC board. All of this had to do with communication. Develop communication line between the board and each subcommittee. Develop an inclusive feedback loop for COC funded providers. Develop process for distributing calls to action for each committee of the COC. We need an informal connection as well as a formal connection. So ideas that were thrown out was a quarterly listening session, virtual open house or office hours, monthly newsletter, memos and agenda packet, updates at meetings, meaning verbal updates at meetings. Developing a communication strategy within the continuum of care. So we need a better understanding of groups within the COC and what each group is doing, but then also groups connected to this space. And then developing communication and update strategy to management council and regional council. I know I kind of gave you a very rough overview. Are there questions about these? Start there.
This is Lisa. I think some of these can be consolidated. So as I was going through, I was doing some notes on ones that I think fit together because it's, way too many, obviously, separately. So
yep.
I have some notes on that. I don't know if I should share that right now.
It's Eric. Can I add to that a little bit? I also think, I mean, it's a great list. Some are roles, and some of them are strategies, and some of them are tactics, and I think a couple are even like aspirations. So that was the other sort I wondered if we might do, or maybe you've already done that, Katie, but you know, just to kind of make it digestible.
We have not done that yet. That is something that we hope you all can kind of give voice to and see what these were the key themes that you all kind of took fragments on sticky notes. So some of these even could be like things that were roles could be changed into tactics or vice versa, but we wanted to capture key themes. And ideally it would be a list of like actions that you all want to accomplish is kind of our focus out of here because you already have roles. And these all came out of your roles and responsibilities. And so that's why I didn't, Lisa, I agree when you say they can be consolidated, but some of those consolidations also lose action. And so we want to have kind of a direct, what are you as the board going to do? I think Liz said this in one of our first strategic planning sessions of ideally this is these are the 17 things we want to accomplish this year, and this is who is responsible for them, and this is how we are going to get them done, for them to not just be kind of another plan on a shelf. And so we really want to have kind of that level of action, whether it is staff taking it on, or you all as the board are taking it on, or you are going to designate it down to one of your committees.
I'd like to, on the first one, on the define policy decisions to focus on and mechanisms for action. You said, Katie, the what and the how. So for me, that's, if we discuss the what and the how, that will get us, some of these will get knocked off the list because there's some that fit directly into that, I believe. So like number 13, the work of the state LIHTC and housing trust fund, that's all policy. So I put 13 with that, and that would be one high on the priority in my view of some of the what we'd want to focus on. And I don't know that we can define all of the what right now, but you know, things that we can have an impact in, maybe some sort of a statement around this where the COC can have an impact, and through, if it's a policy subcommittee or it's at this level of the board, we would have a mechanism to discuss those things. Zoning is another one, you know, local level and broader level, state, that might be one that people would want the COC to weigh in on. I don't think the COC traditionally weighs in on legislation, but I have said I think that would be good if it makes sense to others. Maybe it's prohibited by virtue of the funding. I'm just not really clear on that.
Go ahead, Amy.
Lisa, just a note on that. In the past, we've the Continuum of Care has chosen to defer to the coalition. They do advocacy extremely well, and they track the legislation very, very closely, and they have the relationships in place. So just to give context to how the Continuum of Care has approached that in the past. And in terms of zoning, that might also be more of a role for another entity. But it's worked out very well to have the coalition really being taking the lead on that point.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up. So are we trying to come up? So this sounds like it's like I mean, I'm not trying to be semantical, but it sounds like it's an action plan, and it's got like, what's our time frame? A year? Is that what we want? Okay. And so what we need out of this is action items that accomplish these things and assignments on who's going to do those things. Is that accurate, or am I?
Yeah, so I guess that would be your goal of like, and it could not be a year, right? Like it could be, we
Right.
want to accomplish these things in a year, but we have things that we want to accomplish over 5 years. I can
Okay.
pretty much guarantee we're probably not going to quadruple our LIHTC building in the next
Right.
year. But maybe we will get it like from the standpoint of like that commitment type of thing. So that's kind of
Got
like
it.
your level of difference. We're not going to have another 500 units physically built on the Capitol. However, that there is, so you can, and I will say, like, if this isn't the direction you want to go, we can change direction also. But that was something that you all voiced as part of your charter and as part of your strategic planning, is you want to actually have action steps that you all as a board are working towards, and then potentially the subcommittees and committees are working towards as well.
Well, Katie, if I could add, I think maybe the not the confusion, but maybe that where there's some opportunities for the MAG COC board to implement policy, because of that, recognizing that MAG defers to the coalition on some of the legislative advocacy. We can talk, there's still policy work to be done on, how we run programs and how we operate as a COC. And, I think that that's where there's some real appetite from this group. That's what I'm getting at least. So I think maybe let's just define that. And I think that's also expressed. I heard you say, let's see here, there was one of them that talked about, is it a legislative strategy? Is it a, who? It's almost like when I think about policy, like who is in control of the decision that we want to make a change of? I'm not seeing it anymore. I must have just been dreaming it. But yeah, again, who is in control of whatever we want changed? And I think if we as a board, we can say, okay, well, we're going to focus on systems advocacy within the COC and within the agencies that are funded by the COC.
I like the idea of saying systems advocacy and then further defining what that means, because that could get teeth.
One thing that I don't know if it's necessarily captured in here, but has been captured kind of in your boards and in conversation with you all, is really you all want to be the place people turn to say this is the best practice within homelessness. This is, if you are going to change policy, you should turn to us to ask questions. And so I don't know how you become that, but that would be something that I think should be included in here as part of that policy for system advocacy, is that.
So this is fresh in mind for me lately about what's best practice. And I would say that when we talk, and this is, when we're talking about best practices, it leads into the idea that we need to have measurable goals and good outcomes. And again, that I feel like those, that's also a way to kind of align some of the success stories, emerging practices. I'm trying to control your screen. That's not fair. I'm going to pull it up on my own screen instead of trying to control your screen, Kate.
You could put number 14 with number 3 as well, I think.
Yes, Lisa, I thought that 14, 11, and 3.
Yeah, those could go together.
I'm trying to not change the numbers either, so that this actually makes sense afterwards.
going to number 2 on the dashboard, it seems to me like defining what should be included from the COC agencies would be a subcommittee thing. Like, what's most important that we need to be seeing? What currently does the board see from those agencies that helps tell the story of the goals we're trying to move forward? I would see that as one particular dashboard, and I would see other dashboards on some of these other ones. I'm going through that right now. Or the COC funded agencies might put in their dashboard gaps. What are some of the gaps? So that the story can be told. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're accomplishing. Here are the gaps. We don't have enough resources for whatever. Is that a subcommittee? Does that already happen?
So Lisa, I'm going to pause. Ryan, to catch you up, we are reviewing the summary steps that we pulled out of the mural sticky notes and are working through determining 1 to 15, what are your priorities for 2022 to accomplish? Lisa, to answer your question about what are the gaps in our system, so our system, one of the things that I think can be cleared up is the COC system is $33 million that is coming in from HUD. Most of that is going to housing right now. So about $30 million of that goes to Rapid and PSH, and about $1 million goes to HMIS and coordinated entry, and then some of it goes to cleaning. So one of the challenges when we talk about the system and the gaps in the system, obviously there's a huge gap outside of that $33 million, but it's met through all the other funding sources. And so when I asked the question of, do you want a dashboard with just the 33 million, which is what you all control as a board, versus the system as a whole, which includes local city dollars and kind of all these other players at the table, in order to the majority of our system is not funded by COC dollars. Does that help answer your question a little bit, Lisa?
It does. I think since that's one of the things on here that talks about gaps, I mean, if we're going to identify what kind of gaps we're looking at, it would seem to me that we would advocate, if we're advocating for policy or legislation, if we're going to do that, that's where those gaps are. Like, we know that rapid rehousing and PSH, we need more of that. We don't have enough housing to refer people to. So are there some interim gap solutions that are best practices that can be promoted and shared, like they're doing in Tempe with the roommate sharing? Is that something we would, highlight? Gaps, possible solutions. Is that a role that we should serve as, if we're going to share best practices and gaps?
And this is Liz. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Sorry. So, I can't see the screen right now too, but I may be way off topic, but I'm hoping we can just clearly define our goals first, and look at them through the lens of, and I always say this, but the system performance measures. So, if we align our board goals with the system performance measures, is it to decrease the length of time folks are experiencing unsheltered homelessness? Is it to increase the number of individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness, those who are accessing our shelter beds? Clearly define our goals, because I think the topic around gaps and policy and all of that stuff, it will live in each of those separate goals that we create for ourselves. But I don't think it will necessarily be a strategic plan or a goal that we have set aside. Instead, it will live in, how do we decrease the amount of time individuals are experiencing homelessness? One action plan could be increase LIHTC development, and then there would be policy inside of that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense to me, Liz.
And the only other thing on that is then like taking our system performance measures and then aligning it with our regional action plan so that the two of those now are combined. And then all of our actions are based off of those two, I think, goals that are already set.
I really like that, Liz.
Are you all familiar with the system performance measures that we track?
Because that's really what we should, I think, Katie, you should give an overview of that, but if you would, please. That's really, our job is to really move the performance, and in doing so, reduce homelessness. And within that, it's how are we doing it? What do we need to do it? Who do we need to push to do it? I really like the way you frame that, Liz, a lot.
And
Thank
I
you.
nodded.
And the interesting thing, oh, sorry.
I nodded when you asked if we're familiar with them. I'm familiar with the 7 from HUD. If we do something beyond that, then or different, then I need some information. Go ahead, Liz. Do we lose Liz? Sorry about that.
No, I'm here.
not
Sorry.
sure.
The interesting thing too is that our system performance measures are also impacted by other fund sources coming into our community, because maybe ESG or other fund sources are paying for our emergency shelters. That data, though, is still used when we're trying to determine our system performance measures. So I think that's how we kind of take it beyond the HUD COC funds.
I echo that, the HUD COC funds are just a tiny piece of what's going on. So I really think we should be capturing the whole enchilada.
I'm nodding too, Liz. That made a lot of sense to me.
Maybe for new folks, Katie, do you want to give an overview of the system performance measures?
Yes, I'm hoping you can now see my screen. Nope. There we go. So this is, you may have recognized this. This is what we're going to be going over on Monday during the board meeting on the system flow synthesis. But these are the big 6 system performance measures. There's a couple other, as Eric mentioned, there's 7, and there's a lot of other components to these. But these are the 6 that we are really focused on, and I could pull up quickly. As Liz mentioned, reducing length of time homeless. So this includes all of the people who are in on the street, shelter, transitional, or a safe haven, and have yet to move into housing. So they yet to have a housing move-in date into rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, or they self-resolve their homelessness. This next one is reducing returns within 1 year. So that is people who are have a housing move-in date and then return back into the homelessness system. The third one is increasing jobs and income growth. So people who are in housing, we want to increase both employment income and non-employment income. So it is a one or other or both that we are trying to show. And some of this is a data entry of like, we are seeing non-employment income grow because of Social Security and things like that. And so we need to make sure our nonprofit providers are putting in that data, but then also folks who are entering with zero income, we're getting them attached to employment. The fourth one is reducing first-time homelessness. So the goal is to reduce it. As you can see from this, we are dramatically increasing our first-time homeless numbers. Fifth one is increasing successful exits to permanent housing destinations. So our goal is 53%. We are not seeing successful exits right now. And then lastly, so that would be from shelter, transitional, safe haven into rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, some kind of permanent situation, and then increasing successful permanent housing exits to permanent housing or retaining housing. So we're keeping the people who are in permanent housing in housing or exiting them to something that is not a COC funded program, such as either a PHJ voucher or their own permanent housing that they're paying for themselves. So we want to keep folks housed and then also moving them on to a less subsidized location that is on COC funding. I know I kind of went through those, so please ask questions if none of that made sense or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think now it's like if we list those out and we start to think around what are some action steps we want to take to try to improve measures. The individuals experiencing first-time homelessness, this is just an example. We want to get that to data subcommittee because we want to know who those people are. Where are they showing up? And then is there opportunity for us to take it to our subcommittee to find out how do we like allocate or like reassign our homeless prevention dollars towards wherever those folks are showing up so they're not entering into first-time homelessness. And then on the earned income one, like this is something our COC projects are like just challenged with pretty regularly, is helping folks experiencing chronic homelessness increase their earned income. So as a board, can we connect with like workforce development or any kind of other like strategy that we can also assign to our subcommittee to figure out what other strategies or techniques can we be using to apply, you know, those services towards these folks to try to help move the needle and help individuals gain earned income. Those are just some examples.
Good. So these 6, I heard someone say there were 7. These are ones that HUD are system performance measures that we have to have. Is that right?
Yes.
Sorry, I was finding my
Yeah,
unmute. Yes.
and we're scored on them. We're scored on them too. So like when we do better with our system performance measures, it also improves our, I mean, Katie, maybe Matt can speak on this more, but what it does for us when we submit our application and the opportunity for increased funding.
Yeah, so all of this funding, so the $33 million that we have coming into our system is based off our consolidated application, which is where these are calculated.
Do we have other ones that we want to consider?
Before we go there, I just want to clarify, Katie, these numbers come from all of the programs, not just the COC funded, right? It's our whole system, not just the COC funded programs.
This is all programs that are within HMIS.
Okay. So that's one thing. And then, yeah, I was wondering the same thing, Lisa. So as a board, I mean, these have to be core because these impact our application, and these same measures are being measured across the nation. So I think it's important to focus on these, but as a board, we also might want to have another couple measures or some indicators, benchmarks within these measures that we want to also track. And those might even change over time as certain things, you know, impact our community or become important in our community or that we're targeting in our community.
Something I would like to see, if folks think it makes sense, and I think it's in the regional plan, is adding additional shelter beds. I think there's a goal in the regional plan on how many. I don't think that fits really in any of these, though. It's a different measure that would.
Well, I think that's a how, Lisa. I think that's one of the hows to getting to some of these goals, and it might show up under several of them. Is that adding shelter beds? So I think that would be like a activity or a action step, or one thing I was thinking is I don't see reducing unsheltered homelessness as a specific goal. And I'm wondering if that's something that might be
That would fit perfect with, of course, adding more beds. That would be the tactic. So I'd like to see that, reducing unsheltered homelessness. And that was something I think Liz talked about in decreasing how long people are unsheltered. That one might be harder to measure, but reducing unsheltered homelessness just in terms of numbers makes a lot of sense to me as a measurement.
Well, and I think about it from a municipal perspective, that's something everyone's really going to wants to see, right? Everyone wants to see that. It's very visible.
Yep.
We, of course, want to go the rest of the way on all of these things, but hi, Liz.
Sorry about
So
that.
to provide some clarity on two things, there are 7 jobs and income growth and non-employment growth are combined on this dashboard that I'm showing you, but are actually 2 separate measures. And those are for COC funded projects only. The rest of the measures go across our system. So even though that would probably help our entire system, we are only scored on specifically COC funded on that. And then the other thing to know across for our notice of funding opportunity, the other things that we are scored on is reducing total number and then reducing specific subpopulations. And those are measured based off the point in time count.
So how do we as a board get reports on where we are throughout the year on these measures?
We don't
So
right now.
Yes, you do. This quarterly synthesis is reported on a quarterly basis. We pull we pull our system performance measures on a quarterly basis in Maricopa. So this dashboard that you're seeing on my screen is actually the latest quarter from the last quarter of 2021, which you will get presented to you about 2 months later. So on Monday, you will get this presented to you. In addition, this is something that is going in front of the committee on a quarterly basis. And they're talking about how are we implementing community best practices to start to have these conversations as well. So this is unlike typically, and then on top of that, on a yearly basis, you will get our submission that we submit to HUD presented to you, looking at how are we changing this year over year. So we only pull this on a 1-year basis to submit to HUD, but we are pulling it on a quarterly basis to figure out what are we doing throughout the year.
I'd like
I know it comes to us, but we're not reporting it anywhere except for once a year in our application, right?
Sorry, I just had like 3 people talk at once.
Sorry.
We only report this once a year to HUD. It just happened for a submission. Like submission is due on Monday, and it is for the calendar year of 2021. But we are tracking it throughout the year on a quarterly basis.
What I was going to say is I don't know what others think about capturing, reducing unsheltered homelessness, but I'd like to put that on the table for a measurement consideration. I know it's not required by HUD, but I personally think we should measure that.
And this is where I think we should overlay our system performance measures with our regional action plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I see Eric stand up. Sorry, Eric. I rudely interrupted.
No, it's good. It's good. I have a thought, and I may be out of left field, but these 6, as indicated here by our staff, we're tracking now, right? And all the committees and all the other people in our universe are aligned to these, I think, or we've got some level of data going into them, whether they're all HUD funded or COC funded or not. We know we have a baseline. I don't think it's a bad idea to consider additional measures, but I also hear the urgency in this action plan and in us getting to work. So my suggestion would be, let's stick with these 6 because we know what they are and we can work off of them, and then consider other ones at a later time, simply because we have a lot to do ourselves, right? And we'll also learn by doing, and can identify some of those other items that we might do elsewhere.
It would be a big thing to get to how are we going to measure reducing unsheltered homelessness? That's, so I do think that's a good suggestion, Eric.
I mean, it doesn't have to go off the table. It could be like, we'll have a group working on that,
Keep in mind, yes, working towards what would that look like?
Yeah.
I would like to go back just for a second was, Lisa's question was, how are we reporting this? And so I really appreciate that it comes to the board. Did you say, Katie, quarterly? And it goes to the committee? Something like that?
Yes, it will come to you all first as part of the quarterly synthesis. So in February, May, August, and November, it will come to you based off of the previous quarter. So February would be the last quarter of 2021. And then the month after that, March, June, September, and December, it goes to the committee to have discussion.
Okay. So I think something that maybe would enhance our efforts to lead and make change and help the community is if when we have that presentation, then the board says, okay, what projects I see this number, I don't like this number, I don't like the direction we're going. What should we be focusing on to improve that? Or staff, can you tell us what program, where are we in that? Are we making efforts? Do we need to take some time to focus on that? This one's going well right now, so let's look at this one. I think, are we having those, my question is, are we having those discussions with ourselves when we see these to say, okay, what in our action plan then is geared towards this? Where are we on that program? Do we need to stop and target over there or, that kind of thing? So what action are we taking based on this?
Yeah. And for me, the further development of this is new. Solari's been doing a ton of work on this. So the fact that we're getting it in this way, it's not like it's just been something all throughout time. The other thing I think though, Ryan, is we kind of need to flip it. If it becomes a part of the board strategic plan, then it's coming from the top and going down. And right now, and I think that will build out that infrastructure that you're talking about, where we're hey, red flag on that system performance measure. Hey, subcommittee, can you tell us what you all are doing about this? Do you know what I'm saying? As opposed to right now, we're kind of just waiting for it quarterly, and then we're just not getting the results that I think we could be getting if we had more strategy around it.
So are you saying do a level setting where we all discuss where we're at now, and then that helps us define in the action plan where we're going first and second and how we're prioritizing?
Yeah, let's break these. If we all agree that these are the goals we want to stand behind for now, let's break them out into categories and creatively think about what we want to do about it, and then get the message out to our subcommittees.
And we definitely need that overlay with the action plan, because I'm sure the stuff is there, but that will help us prioritize.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we mentioned unsheltered homelessness.
Yeah. Great idea. Looks like Danielle has a question. Jump right in there. Don't be afraid.
Jump in.
So 5, and I'm just going off the bottom 2. Can you explain the difference? Is it retaining housing, or because that's the difference that I see in the bottom 2, but the numbers are extremely different. So
so the left side of increasing successful exits to permanent housing destinations, those are folks who are in either on our by name list and are either unsheltered or sheltered in temporary housing. So that would be an emergency shelter, a transitional housing, or a safe haven. And they are exiting to a permanent housing destination. So that's either rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, rental on their own, or a diversion program like Safe with Family, etc. Versus the one on the right is people who are already in that permanent housing and they retain that permanent housing. So they're enrolled in a program of the continuum of care and they stay in that continuum of care program, or they exit to a program. It would be like somebody who is in a permanent supportive housing voucher and they move to either a PHA voucher or safe housing with family. So it is somebody who already has a housed destination and stays in that housed destination. Did that help clarify?
And on returns to homelessness, like it's something for our organization, you know, we use HMIS to give us that, right? It's if you've exited from a project to a permanent housing destination, and then you have a new entry into a homeless service within 12 months after, or up to 18 months, it will track you as a returns to homelessness. And what we found is like, because it pulls information from all of HMIS, not just our COC programs, there's area of opportunity when it comes to data collection around that, where it wasn't a legitimate return to homelessness. It was that someone maybe went over and got a shower at St. Vincent de Paul, even though they were still housed, like they just went back there because that's where they used to shower, and we're modifying, changing those behaviors, right? So there's like just, I can only imagine it at the system level, right? If we see that at the CBI level, like what does it really look like at the system level? So how can we then like use our data subcommittee? I think use our ESG subcommittee to talk about getting more data coordination resources towards those programs, to be doing that data dive, making those necessary corrections so that when we're spitting out information, it's true and accurate and it's been validated.
Excellent example, Liz. That's really neat. I have a question about HUD. So when it says like goal 98 with an X through it, I'm just looking at the first one. Was that goal set by HUD, or are those numbers set by HUD, or did we set them at some point?
Those are goals set by us, and it is a so this is comparing previous. So it'll be a comparison of our 2020 system performance measures and our 2019 system performance measures. So it goes back. So we need to beat that in order to get better points moving forward on our NOFO. So that's why we put a goal of 98. If we got 98 or better, 97, 96, etc., we are going to gain more points than we have in the past.
So they expect us to increase the goal, better the goal every year. Like if you've got a really good standard on something, it's not good enough to stay at that standard. They want you to, it has to get better and better and better and better.
Yes, with the caveat of like you, once you hit underneath a certain point, it doesn't make you keep getting better. So I believe the returns to reduced returns, I think, is like under 7% or something like that. Like there's there's a point where it caps off. We are just not there.
Okay. Like I just think it was interesting, the increased successful exits to permanent housing destinations. So the goal is 53. That's because we've been there before. But HUD's goal is probably, there's got to be some capping point.
Correct. And the same thing with like our successful exits, like the goal is 100, but like we don't get knocked off points if we're at 98 or above. Like we've been getting full points for that.
Okay. So those are the goals are based on maximizing our score. Sounds like.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting.
I will also give the caveat of like maximizing our score, but also bettering our system, right? So if we can reduce the length of time homeless, that is better for everybody in our system as a whole. It's not like, yes, the NOFO is important. And
I just couldn't understand like whose goal was 53%. Like, how did we come up with that? Now I get that.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I don't know what your original question was because I sort of came in halfway there, but it sounds like it was to identify what we want our goals to be.
Yeah, so the initial plan of today was to kind of reflect back what we did through the mural and kind of what your goals were from that. It sounds like we're kind of shifting and having this kind of really entrenched and based in the system performance measures overlaid with the regional action plan. So that's going to take a little bit of time on the back end for staff to create that kind of overlay. So I would caution us in kind of using the rest of this time to do that. And potentially we can spend that and maybe even schedule another session to kind of review that data that we overlaid and bring it back to you all. So how does that feel first?
I think it sounds good, Katie. And then like to not lose all the work that was done. I feel like those sticky notes also can just be moved into these new strategies. You know, I think it's all covering
Into the framework. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess based off of that, there was one big kind of trigger, I guess. I don't think trigger is the right word for me, but I feel like you may be missing from this is the communication strategy between you all. So within the COC, how are you communicating down and back up, and how is that working? That I think is not necessarily based in these goals and is more of a tactic and framework and really looking from you all for direction. So maybe we can spend the next like 15 to 20 minutes talking about that, and then I can give you some time back in your day.
Yep, 22 and 23 and 24, some of those components in 24 are about improved communication as well. Well, in 21 too, and 20. Communication is all over the place. And I feel like if it's under a heading, you know, overall improved communication, and then have the sub components and then the strategies there. I agree. We should talk about this next.
Or maybe we have a separate communication plan. Like that's a thing. It's not enough to do the work, but we have to know exactly how we're communicating it. It's less, to me, it's less of a goal and more of a how to.
Yeah.
What is our plan? And I'd like to add to what you said, Katie. So it's the with each other up and down, but also out and to who, you know, and how do people get information to in also, or, you know, I almost feel like a communication plan is it's like its own.
I think about, I think there's internal, there's like board internal and like how we learn about things and do things. And then there's two external stakeholders. And I know we've gotten a lot of feedback over the last year in various settings. We got, I think it came up even in like the listening sessions we did for the strategic, for the regional strategy. But I agree with Ryan, like, you know, it's a kind of a thoughtful approach to what we want to do with communication, I think would be very, very cool.
And I know some of you out there have, you know, expertise in the area of communication. I'm thinking Lisa, Eric, I might not know about the others of you, but I would certainly look to those of you who actually understand this area to maybe guide us, provide some guidance.
Be happy to help.
I was thinking if we started by looking at our internal amongst us, how often do we want to have, maybe it's a quarterly strategy session. So what we do with our strategic plan annually at CAS, and we're having our sessions this afternoon, we get really grounded in it and then where we want to go for the next year. And these strategy sessions have been fantastic that way. And then we check in quarterly on where we're at and if we need to make any course adjustments on the strategies, you know, how are we doing in this arena? So that's the internal part to keep us accountable to the work we're doing. Then if we want to add some other measurements, if we wanted to add the unsheltered, decreased the number of unsheltered on the streets because it's continuing to go up as a goal, we could do that at that point. And it's not complicated the way we do it. We get grounded on where we're at right now, where we think we're going, and then we take input. The second part I was thinking for us in terms of our monthly meetings, some of the things that have been suggested, like doing a quarterly listening session, would it be appropriate to do it at quarterly at the meetings? It's a listening session for what purpose? I know at the end of the meetings, there's a call to public input or at the beginning. is that something that we would make formalized once a quarter? The COC board has a listening session, maybe it's an hour before, hour after, just to listen to community. I don't know if that makes sense.
I love that idea, Lisa. I'm not sure if we want to couple it with the meeting or not. That I would want more input from staff potentially, but I love the listening idea where it's not our agenda. Because right now what we're forcing people to do is work through our agenda, right? Not that they don't have other outlets, which are the subcommittees, right? But that doesn't, I think what we are hearing is like, I'm not connected to the board. And even I feel like the subcommittees even feel like that, even though we're trying every angle to figure out how to communicate with them. I think we haven't figured that quite out either, but I love the listening session idea where it's not our agenda, it's their agenda. It's whatever they want to bring to the table. We would have to know how to deal with that information and, how we've heard this now, how are we prioritizing what we would then have to have a session around what we heard and determine where that fits in our plan or if it's in the parking lot or whatever.
So maybe it could happen the week before we
But I love the idea, yeah.
Do a quarterly strategic planning check-in the week after we did a listening session, because it would be subcommittees. We want candor, we want openness. I would assume it has to be a public meeting, so we might get people from outside who weigh in, and it could help inform our strategies too as we go through the year.
Yeah.
I just love this suggestion. It's great.
The other piece I see here under this is kind of cool because it could be internal and external, but under 25, a real desire, it sounds like, from us to understand, like almost hear like presentations or overviews from the individual agencies, which I know, like for somebody like me who's not in it every day like everybody else, that's huge. Like that's very helpful. I might think I know what a specific organization does, but hearing it from the horse's mouth, as it were, is great. And my sense is that would be helpful to the general, system of providers and advocates too. But we can figure out where we do it. But and people like talking about themselves. I mean, that's just the human nature.
So, Eric, funny you say that. The committee is thinking the same thing because they were getting kind of presented with different topic areas. And so we are recommending going to a quarterly session based on a certain topic. So say the topic is employment, we would bring 3 different folks together who could each give a 5 to 10 minute presentation on what they do as far as employment, and then have a 30-minute roundtable as to
like that,
kind of like connect and mingle and talk about how they could implement those in their programs. So that's something. Do you all want to have a separate one than that, or would you? And it would be open to kind of anybody and everybody.
I love that.
Okay.
Another thing I'm just going to throw out there so I don't forget about it, and I don't know if it belongs here, or I think it's kind of a parking lot issue in terms of, or item in terms of whether we would like to do something like this, but something we do here that I think is super helpful, but also super difficult to coordinate and make everybody, the follow through is not great. So I'm putting that all out there is we do agency site tours for our commission that is making funding decisions. We try to have everybody that's funded get on a 3-year cycle. So once every 3 years, commissioners who will see applications before them each year have an opportunity to go on a number of agency tours, because just like Eric just said, reading it and hearing about it is so different than seeing it and feeling it. That's been a little bit, interesting in the last year or two. We've been doing virtual, and I think we even waived some because we did not want a burden on the agencies. And of course, we don't want to negatively impact an agency or clients, of course, but it's great when you go and see it because it stays with you and what, you really see what's happening in the impact. And then when you're talking about things, you have that connection. The hard part is we make these tours available to our commissioners and they don't show up or they don't commit to, they don't not show up if they've committed to it, but we have a hard time getting them to commit to the times and dates. And then you're putting an agency, you're wasting an agency's time. You know, they're trying to do work and we're asking them for a special favor to please show us what you do. And then people aren't interested. So there's both, you know, it would really have to be worth it. We'd really have to be committed as a board to doing it if we wanted to. So I just want to throw that option out there for consideration at some point.
It's a great idea. I agree with you that if the no-show rate is too high, it is a waste of the agency's time. If the agencies have an opportunity to present to the board, which, and what Katie was talking about, presentations, because then we're captive and then they get a chance and they can invite us out for site tours. But yeah, time is the challenge for some of us.
We'd have to make sure everyone really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And would make the time.
Yeah. There's some other ones on here under 24. We talked about the quarterly listening, the virtual open house or office hours. I don't know what that means exactly. If we would be doing an open house. The monthly newsletter, I love the idea, but I worry, are there sufficient staff to do this? Like some of these things, like we do, of course, monthly newsletters. We're raising money. We have a team. So some of these things, I think staff needs to tell us that's not realistic. We got to stay focused here or whatever it might be. Memos and agenda packet. I'm not sure what that is. And
I can jump in. Sorry, Liz.
No.
So we used to do a weekly newsletter, which I would say is a little bit time intensive for staff. It became kind of an update of everything. It moved to a monthly newsletter, and when COVID hit, it kind of kept going for a little bit and then stopped. We are happy to bring it back, but we want it to be something that you all actually want and will read, because we don't want to just create something to create it. So if that is something that you all want, happy to recreate it. And in the past, the monthly newsletter has essentially been a summary of every meeting that has happened that the Continuum of Care runs, and then upcoming meetings, and then a list of resources at the bottom. That was kind of the format of that newsletter. As far as memos in the agenda packet, this is currently in your agenda packet. I don't know how much you all are reading it. And it is essentially that newsletter just in your packet format. So it is essentially a summary of what is happening in your other subcommittees. And we are trying to figure out, do you all want a verbal update, a written update from your subcommittees? Like, how do you want to hear what is going on? We are trying to be as supportive as we can as staff, but often find without your direction, we kind of are just floundering and don't know what is the most helpful for you. And so that's kind of those last three bullets. The virtual open house or office hours was kind of a, can we create an open space where there is that dialogue that you all would host? Not necessarily every single person would have to be there, but trying to just create that space for you all to gain knowledge as to what is happening in the subcommittees and what is most convenient and helpful to you.
What if for the newsletter, I don't care if it's monthly or quarterly. For me, something substantive, maybe this is where the agencies, we'd have a chance to talk about agencies or areas, like if there was a vocational and workforce presentation, those agencies, that could be summarized. Well, that would be summarized about the meeting, like you said, but maybe the template for this is put together, corner that's about the funded program and what they're doing, and they write that, and then just some updates on highlights for meetings. What would people actually read? I don't want Katie and others to have to produce stuff that people aren't going to read. What would advance?
I would prefer at most, I would prefer quarterly. The weekly, I would read it and it was amazing information, but then it was coming so often, I just couldn't keep up, and I'm not sure if I'm looking back, I'm not sure I need to know every iteration of where we're going with something, which, but I think quarterly would force us to pick the highlights and force us to, you know, it would give us less detail, more the movement from here to there.
And it could have what comes out of a listening session, what came out of the last board. Here's a partner spotlight. You know, listening session, we heard this. Then it's more of a community communication, and maybe it would have a different distribution as well.
So one of the reasons, if we went to a quarterly, would you want all of the meetings for the next quarter? I think we have countless meetings. I think we host about 15 a month. So if we are moving to a quarterly newsletter instead of a monthly newsletter, that would be, we don't want people to miss out on meetings. And so that was kind of where we were moving to a monthly, but happy to hear feedback on that.
So Katie, you're saying it's really essential as a tool to make sure people have notice of these public meetings, the monthly.
Yes, it's also like all of the resources and things happening. I feel like if you go to a quarterly, something that happened 3 months ago, maybe not be as relevant as, I guess that would be the maximum is 3 months, but we move so quickly. At least our team is feeling how much we move so quickly that even 3 weeks ago is sometimes out of date because there's another meeting. So it would be kind of that snapshot of what happened last month, the snapshot of what's to come. But if you all feel like that is too frequent, we can definitely readjust and
I'm feeling like the quarterly forces us into summarize what happened in the last 3 months. Do you know what I mean? And what we don't need to know like every iteration, but where did we get to, or where are we at this snapshot in time in 3 months? And I feel like things like, and I'm just speaking for me, if something comes too often, I tend to start to overlook it because I go, okay, I can't keep up with that. I'm gonna have to set that aside. If something's coming to me quarterly, I feel like I can say, well, 4 times a year, Ryan, you need to stop and pay attention, make time to pay attention to this. And I feel like things like upcoming meetings, is that not something we can post on the website? We don't need, a constant communication for that, but you know where to go if you want to find out where the meetings are, type of thing. That's just my feeling. It sounds like you guys are willing to do it more often. So if there are people who want to see it more often, then.
I like the idea of the quarterlies being more of a succinct something. And if it's necessary, I guess, deferring to Katie, what you think is most important. If you need to send something out monthly with basic information, maybe the quarterly could be a bit more substantive, or a summary of the quarter tied to the dashboard that we get, tied to the listening session, and call it something a little bit different. So I defer to what makes the most sense with staff.
Don't know if I necessarily have an answer for you on that. I do think trying to create 2 different types of newsletters with 2 different listservs may be more complicated for staff. So I would caution you to go to one versus the other. But what I'm hearing is that quarterly with more substitute, okay, you all understand, makes more sense. With moving to the website for calendaring, we have had mixed reviews, I will say, on going to the website and people feeling like they don't know all that is going on. And so community providers have asked us to move back to a newsletter. So I'm kind of throwing that all out there.
Say that again, Katie. The community has asked you to go back to
the newsletter so that they know what meetings are coming up and whether or not they need to get onto a meeting, things like that.
Weekly or monthly?
People have just asked for the newsletter to come back. They haven't said to the frequency. We were leaning towards the monthly just for that like concern around volume of information and getting the most important things included.
Okay. Well, I think that's important. Though, we're not the only ones benefiting from this information. So I'd like to hear how others feel.
I think you were right, Ryan. We're like, we need a communication plan. And then like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Because I think there's a couple of them. And one of them is, I think, like the communication between the board and then the committees. And I'm wondering if we can automate it at all using Mag's amazing IT technology. You have some of the best technology skills that I've seen with the outreach viewer. But basically, like where if we had like our strategic plan and we had measurable goals and like who things were assigned to, and it was posted on the website, and somehow the subcommittees also had their version of something similar. And after each meeting, we all updated it and it got posted. That's one way of like keeping us all kind of looking at the same thing, but then also communicating it in an automated way. And then we already have where the committees come to the board and they provide us with updates, but it's never been where like head down, where we're like, hey, these are the updates we need. And so that's where I think it's more like we've got that automated system and we're like, hey, we're hoping for an update on this from data subcommittee. And we're being a little bit more specific as to what we need. And then they only come when necessary, when either they have something they want to communicate up or when we have something we're hoping to get feedback from them on. Otherwise, it's more just like, hey, you have to be here. So go ahead and find something to talk about. And that's where I think we kind of get lost. But overall, I think we need a communication plan because we also need to address the newsletter. What's the frequency of it? What's the intent?
So what I've heard from you all is we need a communication plan. There's kind of three pieces to this communication plan between you all within the continuum of care, information coming into the COC, whether that is at the board level or across the board level. So that would be like your quarterly community trainings in addition to quarterly listening sessions. And then information going out. How are you distributing what you all are doing and how you are doing it and the work being done? Is that kind of in tune with what you all are hoping for?
Sounds good. A good summary.
So between you all, there was ideas thrown out about adding a quarterly strategy section to review where you are at in your rooted in the system performance measures in the regional action plan, looking at the measures, figuring out what needs to improve, what needs to change. A monthly newsletter or potentially a quarterly newsletter, having a website for calendaring, and then updates going both ways, both updates coming up and information requests going down to have the subcommittees report back on. Anything else that you all feel like needs to be included in your between COC communication plan?
I don't have specifics, Katie, but I mean, I don't just lightly volunteer. I would be happy to help. I can, put some time aside to help come back with a proposal, maybe working with the staff, because I think there's I think we do run a danger of like overworking you guys in things that may not be prioritized. But I also think like we can come back with maybe a proposal or a thought and then see where the board, calibrate it once we hear back from the board. I'm just enough of a nerd to want to think about the technology part of it too. And yeah, so I'm happy to do that if it's helpful.
Very, thank you, Eric. And I don't know if I just didn't hear it, Katie, did you also include how we communicate out, not just to our membership, but also out to stakeholders, whether they're electeds or just, residents or HUD or USICH, like how are we communicating out?
I have that as a section in your communication plan, but you all have not spent any time talking about it. So it is a currently blank column.
That's okay. Just want to make sure it got in there.
So Eric, you are saying that you would like to work on a work group to kind of tease this out further. Are there other people interested in coming together and talking about that?
Yeah, I'll assist. That'd be good.
Awesome. Any other folks interested in that? Other
know,
things,
Jacqueline.
are there other things that you all feel like should be taken to that work group of ideas?
Yes. One more thing I thought of, I think it fits here, tell me if it doesn't. A plan to deal with emerging issues. How does the board handle emerging issues?
Mhm.
What do you mean by deal with emerging issues? Can you?
Something that came out of the blue. It could either be an incident, something came down that we have to respond to right away.
From a
An
communication
organization,
standpoint?
the state or a
just
national organization is asking our COC to respond to something, whatever it may be, that's just not in our normal working and working to meet our mission, but something that comes at us and it needs a quick response. Or it's sensitive in nature, or what's the board's plan strategy to respond? Or how do we receive the information and then make a plan to address it? And it's not something that can wait for a meeting. Potentially, it's not even something that should be presented in public to the full board before there's some conversation around it. Like, there are emerging issues for boards. And what's the plan to handle that?
Yeah, in a nonprofit, that happens, and you may pull together your executive committee, and then the executive committee comes up with a recommendation that goes to the board and says, this is how we're proceeding. We need your input by tomorrow if,
Right.
Such and such. As long as it's in our charter, I think that makes
Yes.
sense. So maybe.
And I think it just looks better if we have a plan for it and we're transparent about that.
Yeah, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. So I know there's a chair and a co-chair. Are there any other executive or officer positions on this board? Not really, no.
There are not. There is, you all don't have any fiscal direct responsibility. So like you wouldn't have like a treasurer, you don't have a secretary, that type of thing. I am your secretary. So that is something, Ryan, I think we can address. I think that is more of a charter conversation than necessarily a communication plan or a annual action plan topic, but can start to discuss that and figure out where that fits within your charter.
Okay. I thought that communications team might be real good at making a recommendation around that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that you all feel like we missed, need to include besides the communication plan, and then an overlay of your system performance measures with the regional action plan?
So this might be a Amy question. As the regional action plan is implemented and moves forward, what kind of cross communication would make sense with the COC? And there's like a lot of different folks involved.
Katie, do you want me to take that or do you want to take that one?
I'll take the first round and then you can kind of add if that works for you. And so the regional action plan is really a plan for local and tribal governments. As you all know, it's kind of gone through very many iterations. And that will be reported to the regional council on a quarterly basis. We are in the process of developing a progress snapshot that will be live on our website showing the progress on each of those 14 steps. So there's 3 main steps with 14 substeps underneath those. That will also be communicated to you all on a quarterly basis as well. So the progress on those will be on the same time frame as regional action or regional council. So you all will be updated on kind of where is that going. In addition, and that snapshot will be updated on a monthly basis. So at any time, if you have questions of like, where are we at with the coordinated entry evaluation, you can go to our website once it is live and see the progress on that. So that'll have both narrative and infographics kind of describing that progress.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you.
I love the infographics.
It's a lot of work, but it's really, that plan is really incredible. So
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're excited that Katie's taking the lead on that from Mac's perspective, and really look forward to continuing to work very closely with the board to make sure that we're implementing the action plan in a way that aligns with the goals and the priorities of the continuum of care as well.
Other questions, thoughts that you feel like we haven't hit yet that need to be included in this annual plan, or is not kind of on the list right now of things to do?
Well, I will just say that I'm going to be very sad to be turning off this board in October, because I think you all are going in a really strong, this framework that's being set up in conjunction with the, implementation of the regional action plan. I think we're going to be very powerful and make a lot of progress in the next years to come. So I'm super excited for you all.
Well, thank you for your leadership.
Oh, you're welcome, but you're going to have to take over.
Somebody has
Someone's
to take over.
Well, you all are going to have to take over.
You're right, all of us. That's true.
I'm glad we have some, so many new folks and voices, and that you got to get in right at this moment to be right here at the beginning, and it's great.
The only other thing that I would say is since I'm still learning, the kind of dashboards that we might need, I don't know what those will look like. I'm a big believer in, what you count counts is a saying that I live by. And if you're not counting certain things, they're not counting. So I don't know what that means in terms of where we end up. And I agree on the approach that Liz was talking about with the systems measurements, but then what other things would we want to count without making it too burdensome? But then we say this is where the needle needs to move and it aligns with the regional plan. And I think some of that we'll discover. So that's why I advocate for doing the sort of the quarterly strategic plan check-in along with the quarterly listening session. And
what do we call our new data mechanism that we'll be looking at again on Monday? Forgot the name.
Yeah, the quarterly synthesis.
I'm guessing that will show us the progress we're making, and potentially it can be morphed into, maybe there is some overlay once we get our framework. Maybe there's a couple things that are added in there or whatever that make it to be one thing. So we don't have to have like numbers that just go with our framework. And then we have this synthesis. I'm feeling like hopefully the synthesis of our data will be telling us how we're doing. Not that supersedes or takes the place of the quarterly strategic plans check-in and stuff. I think that's awesome. But I sure hope our data will tell our story.
Yep.
I think once you start to get eyes on that, Lisa, it will become a little bit more clear how the things kind of marry up.
Thank you.
It's been a tremendous undertaking, so.
Thoughts, feelings. I will give you back 32-ish minutes of your day and we will get to working on overlaying the regional action plan with the system performance measures and what those look like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks,
week.
everyone. So good to see your faces.
Before I let you all go, hold on.
Oh,
I know I tried to give you back, that's why I said 31-ish minutes. Do you all want to schedule another strategic planning session to review this, or would you like to review it in a board meeting?
You mean at next Monday's board meeting, or?
I will guarantee it will not be done by Monday at 1:30 nor posted. We will be talking about just like a brief recap of what happened over the last two sessions and this session. But unless I work all weekend, that will not happen.
Yeah.
And I
That's
have
okay.
boundaries.
Yeah.
So.
No.
No, we obviously need to schedule another session, right, to see the overlay and then get some recommendations from the communications subcommittee.
Yeah, so you can either schedule that in another strategic planning session, or you can bring that forward in your March meeting. Do you all have a preference? If we put it into your March meeting, that will probably be the majority of your meeting, and you have some other conversations that need to happen. So my recommendation would be to schedule another strategic planning session. So I will send out, I will probably just schedule it. If too many of you cannot come, then we will reschedule it. But I'm hoping for the end-ish of March, we will find a date, date and time that works for you all.
I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I much prefer this informal session where we can work together and ask questions and bump ideas off each other and interact with staff openly for this kind of work than a formal meeting where, you know, we have to be formal and, you know, that's my recommendation for all of these kind of strategic planning activities, personally.
I tend to agree, but hi, this is Letitia. I'm sorry. In and out, a lot of stuff. Fridays are just really crazy for me. If we could do it during the week in the afternoon, not on a Friday or a Monday, that would be great.
How does Thursday afternoons work?
Much better.
See some heads nodding, and I see a lot of blank stares.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. I'm gonna shoot for late Thursday afternoon, probably like a 3 to 5, towards the end of March.
Okay, I can do that for once. I just realized we moved our staff meetings to 4 on Thursdays, but I can make it work.
All right, maybe a 2 to 4. We'll see.
No, I can.
We'll
I mean,
see
I
what the
can. I
calendars
can.
look like.
I can forego one meeting. It's cool.
All right.
Thank you.
I will get that scheduled and sent out to you before end of day today. Awesome. Now I will actually give you back time in your day. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.